Hello and welcome to DFS Coach Talk. It's Friday, January 7th, 2022. I'm Andrew Hanson alongside Josh Crash Davis. And today we're here to break down the Saturday NFL games. Last week of the regular season, Josh, and we get two bonus Saturday matchups to break down.
Yeah, we get a little bonus football on Saturday, so got it like that.
Yep, college not involved, not soaking up the calendar on Saturdays. So NFL spreads it out, and we've got two interesting matchups because we've got KC and Denver, and KC has something to play for, and then Dallas and Philly, where both teams are already in the playoffs, but not quite as much motivation over there. But we're going to start with KC and Denver in the first game. KC, the big favorites on the road here by 11 with a total of 45. This one kicks off Saturday at 4:30 p.m. Eastern. Why don't you kick us off with the Chiefs breakdown?
Yeah, so Mahomes, he's very expensive. He's 18,000 in the captain spot, 12,000 in the flex. Talking DraftKings prices here, but he struggled quite a bit in their Week 13 matchup with 15 for 29, 184 yards, and an interception for only 13.6 DraftKings points. Obviously, not what we're looking for in terms of value. Return on that price. And, Denver's allowed the third fewest fantasy points to quarterbacks. So in a showdown slate, he's a strong possibility for a fade for me in tournaments, but in cash games, you're probably going to have to use him as a blocker. But I'm probably going to be fading Mahomes in my tournament lineups.
Yeah, it's interesting that he had such a poor outing throwing the ball. The only offensive touchdown they had, though, was a 10-yard rushing touchdown from Mahomes. And that one was low scoring. It was sort of a different situation on the Denver side, which will probably play into this because Teddy Bridgewater was playing. Melvin Gordon was not. So remember, that was Javonte Williams' day, and he had a big game. We played him. But let's continue on this KC side. So outside of Mahomes, what are your thoughts on the rest of the roster?
Probably going to be looking at Travis Kelce for my captain spot. 15,600 captain, 10,400 in the flex. He scored about 17 and a half DraftKings points per game against Denver in his career. Pro Football Focus likes him as the highest projected scoring tight end this week. They also give him the third best individual matchup when he's matched up against safety Kareem Jackson. So I do think Kelce could be a nice contrarian option for a captain play in tournaments here. So I do like Kelce in the passing game for the Chiefs.
Okay. Yeah, he got the most targets for KC in that first game, so they certainly like the matchup. Hill had 5 targets that day. And again, it was sort of a low volume day for the Chiefs, so you can't, take those stats and run with them all the way.
Right.
But a couple things we can glean from them that I think are important. And then actually, I should mention that I just saw some news on the Denver secondary. They've got multiple absences: Surtain, Darby, and Kareem Jackson out. So it's going to be an even better matchup for these pass catchers.
Yeah.
And with Denver eliminated from the playoffs, that's of course why KC the 11-point favorites. But you got to feel a little better about the KC passing game just with those injuries and the lack of motivation for Denver, don't you?
Yeah, I think so. I think that'll bring Tyreek Hill into play more for me with those guys being ruled out. So,
okay,
if we consider him.
Yep. And then with the running backs, we've got CEH out. So Daryl Williams is a factor for me. He had a real strong game against Cincy last week as that lead back, got in the end zone a couple times. Are you interested in playing him potentially?
Yeah, definitely. And he had 3 receptions for 60 yards in that first game as well, even though he wasn't starting. But he will be starting. And like you said, he had a nice game with the 2 touchdowns last week and 25.7 DraftKings points. So,
and then with those other receivers, Byron Pringle has really, I think, made a pretty steady increase in his role. 4 targets last week, 3 catches. Hardman had a 53-yard reception, but only 1 target.
Yeah.
So I'm leaning Pringle there again, as we've talked about in recent weeks. If you go with a secondary receiver for the Chiefs,
and the other option for me is going to be the Chiefs defense. They held the Broncos to 9 points, including 2 interceptions and a fumble recovery for a touchdown in their Week 13 matchup. And I think that they're going to come out pretty upset after what happened last week in Cincinnati and going up against this Broncos offense that has scored the 10th fewest points per game without their starting quarterback. I just think that this is a good week for Kansas City's defense.
Yeah, I like that play as well. Glad you mentioned that. All right, well, over on the Denver side, let's talk a little bit about it with Teddy Bridgewater out. We've got Drew Locke, of course, and he was actually limited some this week with his right shoulder after getting banged up a little bit in the last game, which was a bit of a disaster. Big loss to the Chargers, 34-13. The funny thing is he was okay statistically. He was 18 of 25, so 72% completion rate, 245 yards, 1 touchdown, and no interceptions. And he does get a couple weapons back this week. Jerry Jeudy, Tim Patrick back in the lineup.
Right.
Last week it was really just Sutton and Fant as the key targets. So Drew Locke, although I'm not excited about him, don't have a lot of faith in him. He's playable potentially. 9,000 on DraftKings is a good price for a starting quarterback. So he's a potential play for me because, again, quarterbacks against KC have done pretty well this year. They've actually 4th best matchup for fantasy point wise. So he's on the radar for me just because he's got those weapons back. Jeudy had 4 catches for 77 yards in this matchup the first time around. He's only 5,000 on DraftKings. That's another price I really like.
Yeah, that's a good price.
That's a little bit strange to me. So this is a situation where I could potentially go Jerry Jeudy and then the rest of the lineup for the Chiefs. Sometimes that ends up being the winning breakdown of a lineup on DraftKings out of the 6 players. If you get a defense or maybe a kicker, you can load up on one side, and of course you have to pick somebody from the other side. A guy like Jeudy at 5,000, I think, is a perfect candidate for that type of build.
Yeah.
So I'm going to play around with that a little bit. Not really big on any of the other wide receivers. They're pretty low volume in general, especially with multiple guys back. It'd probably be Jeudy or pass for me there. And Fant is an option. He was strong last week, 6 catches, almost 100 yards and a touchdown with Drew Locke throwing it to him. And that was with Albert O also playing. He got a couple catches. So Fant could get it done. It's a slightly above average matchup for tight ends against Kansas City. And then the running backs, we got to talk about that situation because, again, when they played before, it was Javonte all day, and he just dominated that game. Over 100 yards rushing, 76 yards receiving, including a touchdown. But Melvin Gordon is back in the fold. Last week, Javonte had 4 more carries than Gordon and 1 catch. But it was disappointing that they weren't able to do more against the Chargers, a really bad run defense.
Yeah.
So that's the concern here is with Locke under center, do defenses just kind of sell out on the run and live with the results against the pass?
Yeah, that would be a concern for me as well.
So as much as I like those Denver running backs and the fact that they like to run it so well and have had a lot of success this year, I'm a little hesitant there. But we'll keep playing with it and see how the final rosters break out. And we'll provide those full lineups to our members. FanDuel and Yahoo, cash and GPP lineups, of course. And then we also do the core builds on DraftKings for the showdown slate with our cash approach and GPP approach. If you want to join us there, dfscoachtalk.com, and we'll have lineups for both of these Saturday games for our members tomorrow. We're recording this on Friday afternoon. Crash, anything else on game 1 before we head to game 2?
No, I think we covered it pretty well. And I will say that you could look at one of the kickers from this game. I think that's a possibility as well, especially if you can't find a wide receiver or running back that you like. You could just go for a kicker.
Yep, that's another way, you get your mandatory exposure to one of the teams like Denver that you're not excited about. And McManus is questionable right now on the COVID list, so we'll keep an eye on that to make sure we know who's kicking.
Yeah.
If they attempt anything,
Mhm.
I will mention also that doesn't sound good for Vic Fangio's future. He hasn't had enough victories. So this could be it for him. Could be a kind of a lame duck situation.
Mm.
And so all signs pointing to a big KC night
Yeah.
or late afternoon.
Yep.
All right, let's go to game 2. It's the late night Saturday game, Dallas and Philly. Dallas favored by 4.5, 43.5 is the total. Dallas has clinched a playoff spot, as has Philly. So these teams feel secure in that way. And there's a lot of back and forth in the media this week about, how much these guys will play, how motivated are they. And so there's obviously some uncertainty there. That Dallas does have, some upward mobility. Potentially, if they win, they could increase their seed.
Hmm.
But they obviously want the long-term health of these guys to
Yeah.
be at the forefront, especially after Gallup, had that unfortunate injury and he's out.
Hmm.
The other news here on the Dallas side, Pollard is out, Parsons and Diggs are out, left tackle Tyron Smith is out.
Yeah.
So they're going to be a little short-handed. So again, we'll see what the final actives and inactives look like, but I'll give a general overview of Dallas here. And coming off that close loss to Arizona, we've got Dak, Zeke, and Lamb as the three studs. And Zeke was really strong against Philly in the
Hmm.
first matchup, 95 yards, 2 scores, caught 3 balls. Slightly above average matchup for running backs here. And with Pollard out, I kind of like Zeke. Backup should be Corey Clement at 200 on DraftKings. He's also in play for me.
Yeah.
If Zeke only plays half the game or, plays a little bit in the third quarter and then they really feature Clement down the stretch,
Hmm.
little revenge matchup for him against his former team.
Yeah.
That's a nice price tag. So, some interest there. Do you have any interest in that running attack?
Yeah, as you mentioned, Tony Pollard is out, so definitely going to be looking at Zeke and Clement for value at only 200. I mean, that's a heck of a price.
Yeah, you can certainly go with both of them. That's really an element to keep in mind for all the games this weekend in certain situations. If you're going to play showdown games for games on the main slate as well, um, with teams that have clinched, or if things
Mhm.
change, you might want to look at trying to get an entire backfield out there. Now, with the passing game, Lamb is almost always my favorite target here for Dallas. Yes, he's more expensive. But then I do want to mention Wilson stepping up, looking to be that number 3 target with Gallup out. And then you might want to keep an eye on the next crop of receivers, Noah Brown, Malik Turner. I've always liked Brown when he's been out there. He's only 600 on DraftKings. He's another option if you want to go with an expensive captain and you need
Yeah.
a couple cheap guys. You could look at one of the backups like that who you figure will get some run here in this one.
Yep.
And then tight ends, it's a really good matchup at that spot. And we had a lot of success, remember, with the Tampa Bay Philly
Mhm.
game using the Tampa tight ends. And it's Dalton Schultz, of course, who's really nice price on DraftKings 5,600. That's the type of price where you could invest in him as a captain. Even if he doesn't play the whole game,
Yeah.
he can pay that off. And he was excellent against them in the first game, 6 for 80 and 2 scores. And then we've got to keep an eye on Jarwin. He's eligible to be activated. Again, this is Friday evening, so we're not sure if he's going to be out there, but keep an eye on that one. And again, like you mentioned in the first game, you could go with a kicker here
Hmm.
in Zerline or the Dallas defense, although, again, they're down a couple of their key guys.
Yeah. Yeah. I would probably lean more towards the kicker than the defense, but
Okay, good. Well, how about the Philly breakdown?
yeah. So Jalen Hurts, to me, is my top play on the slate. I think that this is a really good matchup with Parsons and Trayvon Diggs and Jaron Kearse are all out. And he had a really nice game against them in their week 3 matchup. He had 326 yards, 2 touchdowns, also had 9 carries for 35 yards on the ground for 25.5 DraftKings points in that game. So he's had 2 below average games the last couple of weeks, but I think that he'll bounce back this week against Dallas and put up some similar numbers to what we saw back in week 3. So I think that, if you're playing the 2-game slate, Hurts would definitely be my top option at quarterback.
Okay. Yeah. Certainly love the way he's involved in running that offense. And then let's talk about the running backs, because we've got Miles Sanders out. Howard and Scott look like they're going to be out as well. So you've got Gainwell coming to the forefront, but you got to figure that there's, more of an opportunity for Hurts to score with those key lead running backs out.
Yeah, I'm looking more towards the passing game for the Eagles. Dallas has allowed the 3rd fewest fantasy points to running backs. I know that Parsons is out, so that's going to hurt them a little bit. But, with all those guys, with Sanders and Howard and Boston Scott, it just leaves Gainwell basically. So I think that this is going to be a pass funnel game, and then they're just going to throw it all over the field. I like Devontae Smith. I think that he's going to be a nice option here because they're also dealing with injuries to their tight ends. Both Goddard and Jack Stoll right now are on the COVID list. So there's not a whole lot left for Hurts to throw to except for Smith. You could look at Quez Watkins at 4,600 or Greg Ward at only 2,800. But I do think that they're going to rely heavily in the passing game. And then you can always count on Hurts to run some too. So,
yeah, I agree with that. A couple other notes. Devontae Smith, 37 yards shy of the team rookie receiving record held by Deshaun Jackson. So you figure they'll make sure he gets that. Ward has been stepping up lately and getting it done more so than Jalen Reagor. And if those 2 tight ends are out, like you mentioned, then it's Tyree Jackson, it looks like, who's played 8 games this year, 2 targets, no receptions. So be aware of that name, 2,600 on DraftKings. We know how much Philly likes to throw to the tight ends, so he could be a decent punt play.
Yeah.
And then I also wanted to follow up on Gainwell, because this is the one price tag that jumped out at me the most in this game. 1,600 on DraftKings, and they obviously priced that, not knowing about all these absences of the other lead running backs for Philly. And to me, this is a spot where, like you mentioned, it's not a great matchup, but if he's getting the bulk of the carries, he's actually a guy that I'm looking at as a potential captain on DraftKings, because at 1,600, you put him at the captain for 24. You can afford almost all the studs that you won this game, and you can actually feel pretty good, because even if they don't play the entire game, you probably still figure that they're going to score more than their backups. Right. So
yeah.
And the other reason that this is attractive to me is because if they're not going to play the whole game, they're less likely to have a ceiling game of 30 fantasy points.
Yeah.
And so Gainwell, if he only scores 10 or 15 and he gets the multiplier, he can be almost even with a lot of the key guys in this game. So it's a perfect scenario for me to look at that. And usually we use a cheap captain like that in a GPP lineup. But when it's a lead running back in this type of game, I think he could actually be a cash game captain for me. So we'll play with that, and just didn't want the members to be surprised if that's who we presented to them as our cash game captain on DraftKings.
Yeah, I like that.
All right, great. Any final thoughts here on game 2?
No, I think, hopefully these are going to be some fun competitive games to watch. They don't get too blowout heavy like we've seen, in recent games like that. So, looking forward to hopefully having some good games to watch on the Saturday for, a change a little bit. So,
yeah, we have had some interesting ones, right? With Minnesota in the cold against Green Bay, and then Cleveland, and just, not really pushing it and resting Chubb and
Right.
some funky ones here. That can happen at the end of the season. So another reason to go a little bit lighter with your investments, in my opinion,
Mm-hmm.
on games like this. But there are still some big contests.
Yeah.
So that's why we're going to grind and put our best foot forward and still feel confident that we're going to have a successful outing with our contests.
For sure.
Excellent. All right. Well, good luck, everybody, with your Saturday contests. We appreciate all your support. Make sure to tune in with us for the playoffs as we'll be breaking down all those games. Can't wait for that. And of course, NBA and PGA coverage continues here at DFS Coach Talk. Any questions, you can reach out to us on Twitter at DFS Coach Talk. Again, grab the membership at our website, dfscoachtalk.com. We'll get you into our Discord with an email. And it's a great community, so we certainly encourage you to join. All right, on behalf of Josh Crash Davis and the entire DFS Coach Talk team, I'm Andrew Hanson. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time as we look to crush it in DFS.